All right, this is awesome, guys. We're just giving it a couple of moments for everybody to log in, get their audio and video in order. Um, Another fantastic attendance, guys. I'm like super stoked about that. Another great day for learning, obviously. Um, we'll just give it about another 30 seconds to a minute for everybody to get settled in, and we will get started. I think we can get started. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us here today for planting our seeds in relationship with Grandmother's Voice. And always, before we begin, I would love to do a land acknowledgement, and I would love for 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 some feedback from Jody and Sherry, because I'm going to read something, but I'm also going to be vulnerable enough to share an experience to internalize that learning. So we want to acknowledge and thank Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being the stewards of this traditional territory. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis, from the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Arawandaran, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. And as I had the pleasure of walking outside today, um, the rays of the sun like really impacted me in a positive way. It had a physical impact in terms of how I felt inside, in terms of the brightness that I felt of the sun inside, and I noticed how connected I felt to the land, how connected I felt to Mother Earth, and how connected I felt to the earth. And I reflect on the traditions of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and I reflect on how we all need to be connected to one another, how we all need to be connected to this land. And simply by reflecting on the rays of the sun can allow those internalizations to occur. So that is my reflection. And with that, I want to pass it on to Daniel and Jody and Sherry. If you have any feedback for me, feel free to share, because I always want to get better at doing the land acknowledgements and always learning.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome. My name is Daniel. I assist the town in moderating some of our free virtual programs. So glad that so many of you decided to be here this evening. As you know, many of you may be fluent in Zoom, but for those of you who aren't, we have a chat box that's enabled for you to communicate. We do ask that people use the hand up feature if they have questions that they want to submit verbally. You can ask private questions. I believe I've enabled them to the host if there's things that maybe you want to have prompted to Jody, Sherry, our instructors this evening, but you don't necessarily want to make them public to the group. Otherwise, do keep yourself on mute so that we don't have too much competing voices and noise. This is open to everyone in the community. I know many of you who are here have registered. Know that anyone can come in from anywhere. So we just want to ensure that this is a place of respect where everyone can respect one another and enjoy each other's perspectives. You've likely received communication from me through the week of our past recorded sessions. We do record so that we can ensure that we have a record of these communications and that we can continue to learn, and those who aren't able to hear can still learn. Another additional note is if you can kindly message myself if you require any accessibility accommodations to really get the most out of this Zoom presentation, I'd be happy to understand and work with you to see how Zoom or us with the town can ensure that that is met. I will turn things over to my coworker, Tanya.
Hello, everyone, and welcome this evening. Before we get started, I just want to go through 4 agreements that we will all as a group agree in our participation this evening. One is to stay engaged. Staying engaged means remaining morally, emotionally, intellectually, and socially involved in the dialogue. 2, experience discomfort. This norm acknowledges that discomfort is inevitable, especially in dialogue about race, and that participants make a commitment to bring issues into the open. Thirdly, speak your truth. This means being open about thoughts and feelings and not just saying what you think others want to hear. And lastly, expect and accept non-closure. This agreement asks participants to hang out in uncertainty and not to rush to quick solutions, especially in relation to racial understanding, which requires ongoing dialogue. And now I'll pass it on to Jody.
Scano, Sego, Ani, hello, bonjour. I'm so happy to be here today. Sherry and I were out at the land, a new space that we were offered, Grandmother's Voice in the Indigenous community in Halton, urban Indigenous community. And everything that you said, Nabil, resonated. Thank you so much, Nyawa, for sharing. You know, the acknowledgement, land acknowledgement that you read actually was something that I believe the Indigenous Education Advisory Council of Halton created years ago. Tanya was a part of that. I know that the town and community members. So I'd like to acknowledge that. It was beautiful, and it was a collective process. And oh, there's my beautiful sister. And so thank you for sharing those words. Nabil, your energy, I've always loved it. Just your transparency and your love, and Daniel, your passion for doing this is something that Sherry and I really honor as men stepping forward, moving aside, leaning in, all the language that everybody's using this day to show like your love and support is really honoring. And Tanya, you're just our sister girl. You're awesome in everything that you've done. So I'd like to acknowledge our friends and the people that have come to gather with us. If you were with us last week, we actually started with the Thanksgiving address. We read most of it. The Thanksgiving address has been around for thousands of years from the Haudenosaunee people, and it's how we begin all of our gatherings. Anytime that we need the people or are asking the people to come together with their, one mind, a good mind, an open heart. I believe that's exactly what Tanya read, right? Pretty much just said, hey, let's come together and be in a good place and space and come together to support one another. And so because we read that last week, we won't read the whole Thanksgiving address, but we will acknowledge that the Thanksgiving address is giving honor and acknowledgement to everything that Mother Earth and nature provides for us, from the people that arrive to the waters, Earth Mother, the sun, the moon, Grandmother Moon. So all of the wonderful elements and energies that are provided for us to live and sustain who we are. So I'd like to thank you all for showing up this evening. If you were with us last week, thanks for coming back. And we look forward to spending the next 50 minutes with you. Nyawa.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Like Jody said, it was a wonderful, heartfelt welcoming into the space, and for an awful lot of the viewers and the participants that are participating today. We kind of unpacked a little bit about the land acknowledgement last week and how important it is for you to understand, because that was some of the comments, and that you didn't know the history, right? And we're here to tell you bits and pieces of the history that we know. And so, unpacking that land acknowledgement is really important, but also giving grace and being grateful for what we have, because we don't take enough time to be grateful, because we're always busy. We're going back and forth, and it's really taking the time in the morning to really look outside and be, thank the Creator that you still have another day on this planet. And what are you going to do? How are you going to be impacted? And what are you going to do for today? And I think it's really important that we kind of take a step back and really look at that, but also moving forward too, right? Because our grandmas that we're with all the time is always saying, we need to leap, we need to make steps, and we need to go forward. And so it's really important that, we're planting the seeds. People are encouraged in this forum to ask questions, and Daniel has compiled a whole bunch of comments for us, so that's perfect. And so, we do have a plan of where we're going to go, right? We have a plan. On Monday last week, we did the Thanksgiving address and kind of talked a little bit about it, and then today we want to talk about bits and pieces of the Thanksgiving address, but also help us to move forward in the next 6 weeks that we're going to be together after today, 6 more weeks, to talk about different things that we have, the different outcomes that we may have for the evening. And we'll get to that before we leave as well. But I know that we wanted to have a conversation around some of the comments, and Jody's got the comments in front of her. And we wanted to just talk a little bit about the comments and some of your concerns, some of your queries, some of your comments, and even just where to go, right? Where do I learn this? Where can I go to learn as a citizen in Oakville, a resident in Oakville? You know, where can I go to learn? So we want to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to talk about next steps.
Sorry about that. I somehow started reading the chat, and I can't do that. There's too many things at once. But I'd like to thank all of you for sharing. Daniel, you know, we had our plan, you know, because we try to be as structured as possible when we're delivering, but who are we kidding? Sherry and I, once we get into the energy of we just want to share what you know, that's what we want to make sure that all of you understand, is that we're just two women, like, you know, everybody out there. We just want to do the best that we can. We want to be the best person we are. And so when Daniel said to us, wow, we received so many beautiful messages, I said to Sherry, this is where we have to go. And again, you know, we always talk with the grandmothers about the work that we do. So when we shared with them that we received all of this, you know, this information, they said, you need to go there. You need to pay attention to the people that are asking, and you need to talk to them. Show up for them, don't show up for you. And so this is the work that they remind us to do every single day. And so thank you so much for sharing this. I'm just going to read from here, and we'd love to just share what we believe that we know in answering these questions and these queries that Sherry said, because it's really about moving into this space. And, you know, I still sign up for as many programs as I can. My language, I always think that that's I'm such an emotional person that I'm constantly saying, you know, oh my gosh, am I going to say this right? I don't want to insult someone because maybe I don't have the language. And so that was one of the comments that somebody had said, is that, you know, I'm learning, and I maybe dealing with more First Nations communities, or learning that there's more Indigenous people out there, and am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to insult them? Am I going to, you know, hurt their feelings, or I want to do it in the most respectful way? And it just takes me to this. I remember this one time I was out with the grandmothers, and we were at a big wellness healing center, and, you know, they always break off, even though they're there for a purpose. They end up being in intimate spaces with the people that come and say, I'm here to know more, and how can I help you? So here was Grandmother Renee. She was in with a person, and an older gentleman came up, and he's like, you know, when's Grandmother Renee going to come out? And I was like, oh, she'll be out in another hour. He said, well, I'm going to wait right here. And they waited, and an hour went by, and then it was, you know, another hour and a half. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, she's still on. He said, I just can't leave until I talk to her. And I was like, well, maybe if you tell me I can help you with this. He said, I used the word Indian. I called her an Indian, and I feel so bad. I don't want to leave until I tell her that I didn't mean to call her an Indian. And so, you know, because her and I work so closely, I just said to him, like, did it come from a good place? Like, were you saying, hey, you're say it in an angry way, or was it a loving way? Because she would know that. And so that was the lesson, you know, moving forward for him and for myself even, was that I never talked about that, but the grandmothers always say, if you're going to do something and it's from a good place, the person receiving it knows that. So it's really the intention, it's really the way that you deliver, but also it's more about how you deliver, where that comes from. And when we say that, even the heart space, you know, from your mind to your heart, that's something Sherry always brings up. One of our elders had said, it's the longest journey ever in your life, is from your mind to your heart. And so if we can move past, the learning is in our mind, the being and the living and experiences in our body. That's the difference between where we were maybe coming into this space and where we want to be when we leave. And so there was a few people that actually said they don't want to say the wrong thing. They just want to be able to do this. So I invite you all just to from this moment on, know that when you're moving forward in any kind of reconciliation or wanting to know, just do it because you need to do it in your heart. Yeah. So Sherry, there was another, do you want me to read another one and then maybe you can jump in? I don't know, that just kind of flowed. So I wasn't even sorry if I just went there. Somebody had mentioned the identifying themselves. There were actually 3 people that identified to myself personally, and then through the platform. And I get teary-eyed when I say that we so welcome you here, because I see some of our Indigenous sisters on here. Andrea, I love you for, you being here, and all of the other friends, Indigenous women. But that was another thing, Sherry, that self-identifying, showing up, just knowing the Indigenous community is here. And this is so amazing to the town. Thank you for providing this opportunity, because we needed this. Did you want to add anything to that, Sherry?
Yeah, and I just want to, it's hard, not hard, but like when you are living in an urban area and you feel that you're all alone, trust me, Jody, and I've been there as well. I've lived in Halton for 25 years and never knew that there was people that looked like me. I always knew that there was, but because of that identifier of self-identifying, right? We don't ask non-Indigenous people to identify. So it's kind of interesting that we're asking Indigenous people to identify, because we know the reasons why, because municipalities, governments, organizations, when they know that they have Indigenous folk in their community, they can get money for it, right? And where, and when we're asking our schools and our students to identify, or the parents to identify, a lot of parents really will remember that when their parents had identified, they were scooped up. And I think I mentioned that last week, that they were scooped up, kidnapped, and taken away. And so there's a risk of identifying. Then we don't know who our neighbor is, because we're not in community like we were before. And if we know who our neighbor is, then we may not be so hesitant to identify, but we don't know who that neighbor is. And that neighbor could come at us with negative comments, connotations, everything, because, and having those situations happen, because it happened to me, where I bought my house and my neighbor had open the sash and said, "Thank goodness that lady never sold her house to a bunch of Indians." And I was kind of like, oh. And it felt right here, right? And nobody else except for Indigenous people ever, and racialized people, will get targeted. And so we when somebody came and said that in the comments and had identified, we're just kind of like, oh my gosh, like we are finally making space in place, and we're able to have these conversations in an open forum and an open dialogue. And so I think that that's really important for that as well.
Thanks. And so as well, on that note too, we were out at the property that, we'll get to the bigger story one day, but just to know, we actually, a community member actually offered space to the Indigenous community. And so we're building that up right now with a healing garden and a space. But when the gift that we have to share with everyone here is, so we were there today talking with an organization called Ojibwecon. They're an Indigenous organization from Toronto, and they plant gardens, urban gardens in Toronto. And so we invited them, when we were offered this opportunity in Milton, we invited them there to take a look at the split space and support, because what we were thinking is, whoa, if we're given 2 acres to plant, what a way to invite your community together and really create community. So anyway, long story short, they came out, we spent 3 hours together, and before the lady left, she said, oh, we knew she was Indigenous. We could tell the conversation, the language was there. And then we were like, so, you better get going because you'll get stuck in traffic. She's like, oh, no, I live in Burlington. We're like, what? an urban Indigenous woman in Burlington. Why? How do we not know you? Like, we know so many, we know Andrea, you know, we're meeting people. Why did we not know you? And she said, I don't know. You know, and then we started to talk more, and really, like Sherry was saying, and this isn't about bashing governments and municipalities. This is about creating space for Indigenous people, and for Indigenous people to find each other. Urban Indigenous or Indigenous people, it's 85.5 people or percent in the community, right? They're not all Indigenous people live on the reserve because they can't live there. So we're here and we're finding each other. And so this is so wonderful. We're like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is how it's happening. And so the fact that she was there and she belonged to this organization in Toronto, because she said, I don't need agencies. I don't need services. There's nothing wrong with my family. I need culture. You know, I'm learning history. And so, like most of you on the platform, and like the few people that messaged in here, you know, I've always been interested in First Nations, wanting to know about the history of and their love for nature and everything about Indigenous people. A lot of Indigenous people are learning still. So this is what's great about where we are in society right now, is that we're learning together. And so history is in this moment right now. You know, and there's so many times, like even going back to Nabil and his land acknowledgement, you know, that's changed now. Even, you know, we could say that there is so much that has changed, and that was created, like 4 years ago or 5 years ago. We did great history then, but in this, in Halton, we're realizing that there's even more history, and there's even more that's unfolding. We're learning every day. So, you know, to get to kind of be stuck on, I need to know the history that I wasn't taught in school. We're all learning that together. So, so just to kind of to mention that we'll do that together, you know. And when we're finished on this platform, it's wonderful to know that there'll be a space for everyone to come and gather and do that learning together. So the next comment, and thank you, like these are so great, because Sherry and I were really, like I said, trying to you know, make sure that we can get everything in that we had on our program. But this is, to us, was a more organic and candid way to have this conversation and really look at, you know, what we can talk about right now in this moment that's happening, and then what we know we're going to bring experts in the room for. So the reconciliation and understanding, you know, what was hidden from us, from the government. You know, Sherry, you can speak to that, Sherry, but I always, you know, the grandmothers always say, you know, we can keep going back and we can keep revisiting, but that's not where we are today. If we do that, then we're never going to move forward. And so to understand the history of what happened to the people is, you know, a place, and I say that people need to really do that learning on their own, because to have the Indigenous people continue to talk about those histories is keeping them in that place of trauma. Mm-hmm. And so this is why we say, read a book, you know. And Sherry, you want to jump in? I saw your mic.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, and it's not like, you know, it was robbed from all of us, right? And then the same time that you were learning certain things, our parents were learning the same things in residential school as your parents were learning in grade school. And we know, and, you know, and we'll get into that in maybe later on. And we know the reasons why. You know, we know the reasons that it was hidden from the rest of Canada is very few people know that there's treaties, that there was treaties signed in this country. Why were there treaties signed? Well, treaties are normally signed nation to nation, right? Knowing that there was nations upon nations that are on Turtle Island and what we now know as Canada. Why weren't we told those kinds of things? We would have been in a different position back then than we are now. But we also know that colonists have moved here, right? They totally different mind frame than Indigenous folk. And to see that the women had so much influence in their communities, whereas women across the pond never had as much influence as women over here did. And so to really break down those family systems, family ties and structures, political systems, and knowing what we know in history, there's so much that you can Google now, because when I went to university, I still had to search it up on the index and then go do the Dewey Decimal System. And find a university or a library that would have this information. So it's so easy right now. And there's there's a book right now that's called 21 Things You Should Know About the Indian Act. Okay, you can Google it. His name is Bob Joseph, and this man is awesome. And he breaks things down, right? But we want to also talk about, reconciliation. How come all Canadians don't know about that? How come all Canadians didn't read reports, right? When we know that the commissioners went from coast to coast to coast for 6 years and gathered over 7,000 statements, umpteen statements about the residential school. And, and it's sad to see that, it had to take something like that in order to get elevated, right? But then now that we don't have something like that, the Truth and Reconciliation, but we do have the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry. Over 2 volumes, 231 calls for justice. So we're always calling for justice. We're always calling for action, but it's up to Canadians and residents to take up those actions. And like Jody said, it's Indigenous people are always, and we want to learn, and we want to be part of that. But it's not up to us to do this teaching, right? Because it becomes tiring, and how are we going to be looking after our own self? We do this with the town of Oakville, and we do this in our community because we know that it is needed, and because we've also built relationships with the town of Oakville as well. And we're wanting to build relationships with every single person that's on this forum, this video, because we know that you're going to be coming up to our land and seeing that and being with us. And so I think it's really, really important that, just lean in a little bit, what Tanya was talking about at the beginning. Some of the stuff you're going to feel uncomfortable, but lean in, learn a little bit. And I'm not saying that you're not learning, don't get me wrong. It's just an overall statement. And read the 6 volumes if you want of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That is the most concise history you'll ever get. That was one, or the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, the RCAP. Again, wonderful resource, right? And a really in-depth piece of history. And we should have those in our schools. Absolutely. That should be taught in our schools. That's up to the teachers to learn that, and up to a person like me, because I am the lead at our board, a person like me to guide our teachers into, if they're wanting to put that in the curriculum, where can I go? I tell them, these are different things. We have certain things on our website for resources. And so, again,
Sorry, Sherry, I
really want to go back to what Tanya was saying, was just lean in. Canada Reads has tons of, there's Indigenous authors there now, right? We were never included before. Marrow Thieves, wonderful book. Johnny Appleseed, wonderful book. Wonderful.
Daniel has his hand up.
Yeah, I have my virtual hand up. I figured I'd be the one to start trying that. So there's a feature enabled, so you'll see that kind of a hand will come up over the screen of someone in video. And you did begin to answer my question there, but I was hoping that maybe you'd be able to put some of the references and links that you're mentioning as good reads into the chat. I know when folks were submitting some of their learning outcomes, there was one, a teacher saying they want the right resources to be able to teach their students. And then there was, participants saying, I wish I learned, a more appropriate Canadian history in school. So I think if we can, when we're using references to materials, if we're able to actually link the name or even the link in the chat, that would allow us to, thank you, Sherry. I see you're already doing that. That's perfect.
I was just going to say, hey, can somebody else do that? This is a lot to ask about. So I'm just kidding.
That's why there's
like,
2 of you.
That's a lot. But actually, I'm seeing Susan mentioned, I guess she used to work at the library, and you're right. There are resources, and Marcus at the library is awesome for that. I bet you he has a ton of books. And I think there's a few other groups that are out there that, are doing book clubs and that kind of stuff. But if you can totally even message us, Grandmother's Voice, and we'll send you. But I think it's definitely something we should offer this group. If you're okay with that, Daniel, we'll put something together and put together some resources. There's so much out there, and Sherry just listed braiding sweetgrass. And if you want to get in deep with culture, I got that book on audiobook or Audible, And I walk with that book, and I'm so in gratitude when I walk with that. She is so beautiful and delightful in every way that she shares her stories. But what I wanted to mention, Sherry, when you were talking about the work that we're doing in Halton, you know, just to give a little bit, I don't know, I think I may have touched on how we started with this, even this conversation with Tanya and Daniel and Nabil. It was very, very organic, right? It was like, hey, you know what, we're doing this work. Let's just create a space that we can invite people to that you know, to want to know more. And so when we did talk about this with the grandmothers and the uncles, it's our responsibility. That's what Grandma Renee and Gail said to us. We all come here with responsibilities and with instructions. And so because we've moved into this place and this is what we do, for Sherry, it was a career that she's been, you know, immersed in for, you know, as for a very long time. I think she said talks 30 years or something. And for me, it was you know, my connection to culture. And that's what immersed me. It kind of, I left my everyday life to do this. And so when you do this and you're guided by the women that we're guided by and the elders that we're guided by, it's our responsibility. So it's not that we don't want to, you know, we want to, we need to, this is what we need to do. We would just like you to let go. And that's what the lean in and all of that is let go of everything that you thought you knew up until now about what it means to learn about Indigenous ways of being and knowing. So thank you. And Sherry, I just love you. I love working with her. Come on, this is so good, you guys. It's the energy and just seeing faces when somebody, it's like I can see some faces that are like, I'm getting it, you know, and the nodding. And that's just really reassuring for us to know that we are connecting with you. And so there's some messages in the chat here. So there's some messages about specific treaties. We'll definitely talk about that. We have an amazing uncle, Uncle Mike, Dr. Mike Dockstader from Ryerson University. We love him. He was on our speakers series. He did a seven visits with us. And if you haven't visited Grandmother's Voice YouTube channel, since the beginning of COVID, we've been doing videos, and that was something that the grandmas said, hey, if we have this opportunity to get it out there, this is a time to share our knowledge so that people are learning, you know, with us. And so you can visit the YouTube channel, and you'll see some videos from even Morris. He's on there and he talks about treaties. His whole time was going back to Treaty Week, right, Sherry? So that would have been published in October. Is that, I think we had him in on the, so you can visit there and you'll have like an hour of conversations, and he's great. He's a great instructor on that. We had a few people that had asked about the TRC's calls to actions. That we are going to definitely probably talk about too, we'll be talking about that constantly, because the TRC's calls for actions is for all of the sectors. And this is pretty much how we became connected with our sponsor, I say sponsor, partner, Country Heritage Park. And he had no idea that it was reconciliation. We actually presented him with the TRC book, the little pocket book, and he's like, what's this? And we're like, this is what you're doing. And he's like, I don't know, but you know, 3 weeks of with that book, he's like, so this is reconciliation? He's like, I just thought I was, you know, I guess I was doing reconciliation, not realizing that I just needed the Indigenous voice to be here. So we'll be talking about that. Sherry, did you want to add anything in there? I can hear you.
I know. I am, as we're doing that. I just typed in the video, Morris Switzer's video from Halton Indigenous HCDSB, and that is there. We filmed him last year, and he talks all about the treaty and how it is in hypocrisy, right? When it comes to the Canadian government. So go over there. He is an expert. And Morris Switzer is also on, I should share if anybody wants to learn, and there is a lot of free courses that are on here through the University of Alberta. I believe UBC has a free course. And there will be more free courses come in June to acknowledge National Indigenous Peoples Day.
There's been a suggestion in
Courses
the
that
chat
are
here.
on the.
Sorry. Oh,
Oh, no, that was to Sherry. Sorry, that's my,
Oh, no, I just, you guys, there's just a suggestion coming through the chat that maybe, because we do have strong partners with Oakville Public Library, perhaps we could put together a reading list of materials through Oakville Public Library that you guys could vet. That way, when we share it with this group, it just provides additional resources of learning. But we can take care of that offline. I'll book a time for us.
Yeah, that's perfect, because Marcus will have a whole bunch of resources, and any resources that he doesn't have, we also have a really good, and we'll put that in there too. We also have a really good partnership with an Indigenous bookstore that's in Brantford called Good Minds, and anybody can purchase anything from there, and it's all, and they're all been vetted, and they all have been, yeah, they've all been vetted, those resources. So that's perfect. So there is, even though that I'm typing away, trying to put all sorts of stuff, you can see for yourself, there is lots of resources out there. And within our school board, just so that you know as well, that we're going down, that we're practicing cultural relevant pedagogy. And we're looking at all of our collections and whose voice is in that collection. And if it is just one voice, that is kind of put aside, right? Because we need to include a lot of different voices in our schools and in our learning. And that's one thing that is just that both school boards, I know for sure that both the public board and the Catholic board are doing that as well, to make materials a lot more relevant than when I was going to school. I went to school in the 60s and 70s, 80s, right? And even making it relevant from then. So, but I know that we have a few more other comments that we want to get to, and we've only got 20 minutes left. It goes by so fast.
actually, you know what? I'm just going to acknowledge that someone just messaged in here that this session is going far too fast for them. So, I just wanted to just kind of make sure that we slow down for those of you who think, if we are going too fast, this is we were really excited about this information. And so I think that we just want to make sure that that we want to cover everything that keeps getting, that's addressed, because this is a lot of information. And this is, and I think we stated at the very beginning of this session, if you weren't here at the beginning, that we just are trying to stay as focused as we can, but going by what people delivered to us from our last message. So that might just be a good way to move forward, is that we won't be able to we can use the references and these that you send to us, but we might not have to do our framework, I guess, and our delivery based on what people are giving to us. But we did want to just let you know that there are conversations in here that are just or concerns or asks that really are more about, how am I going to do this work? How am I going to move forward? And so there are a lot of resources out there. So just to kind of reiterate that, the library, there are a lot of organizations that are already doing this work. And so if you really want to do the reading part of it and learn the history, you can find the resources to spend time in there, or you can be in a conversation with two women doing the frontline work in the community, really trying to make change. Because we can get stuck in the learning, or we can move forward in the being. And that's what the grandmothers say to us. We are, thanks, Tamara, you're right. She said, perhaps you need to extend this program to 10 or more sessions. And you know what we're really hoping that what happens is that we create this space when we're back out in community, and every one of you joins us at our center, because the center is for all of us. This is not for just Indigenous people. This is about reconciliation, coming together and being together. So we appreciate every comment that comes in here, and we just want to acknowledge you the best way that we can in the 1 hour that we have. And so thank you so much. And maybe we will. I love that 10 sessions, or however many it takes. The voices here are really important, and it's not just mine and Sherry's. And I think that for a lot of you that have joined us on this this journey, that's what is really important to us, is to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that we can move forward and make change in the community. And I feel actually that we should acknowledge that Sherry and I did spend like 4 hours this afternoon with some amazing women in Milton, Sustainable Milton. I'm going to shout out to you because I know you were rushing off to be here with us as well. They came to us right when they heard that we found space, and they said, we want to be here for you. And we want to acknowledge that it was when you left today, Sherry and I were just in so much gratitude that you reached out and you said, what can we do? And you came and you brought plants and you brought yourself and you brought your spirit. And that's so important to us. So keep coming back, and everyone know that this space is for all of our learning. And so there's a lot of about the learning in these messages, really wanting to know, how do you move forward? Coming here, there's probably about, it looks like several about, coming here to actually hear from grandmother's voice. What do we recommend, and how do we, ask you, or what do we expect? There's no expectations. We're doing this for our children, for the children, and the future faces, coming faces, and to really just help bring healing to our communities and coming together. So what we'd like to do, there was this somebody sent a really nice long paragraph, and in it was missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And so yesterday we actually had a missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls honoring ceremony, because last fall we gathered in October for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, Sisters in Spirit. And we said, what do we want our calls for justice to be? What are we going to focus on? And we've been doing these Sisters in Spirit vigils here in Oakville, really like for the last 8 years, as far as I know. But some of the women on this panel joined us yesterday from WHAM and GASP and all of these women's groups that have been here for like long before me, I think. And so they joined us. So that's another link or another video that you can watch. They joined us yesterday, and it was pretty amazing. But what we did is we created a healing garden, medicine garden, and it was the living monument. That's what we called it. And so we hope that this day going forward, anytime that we do anything in Halton for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, that you will all know that that space is open anytime for you to visit, to honor the spirits and honor the families, and even honor yourself to go there and find your healing and your peace there. I don't know, I feel like I'm talking too much. Sherry, do you want to jump in?
No, I think when we're looking at we do have an agenda, and what we were looking at today was the topics were Indigenous history, Indigenous treaty, importance of community and representation and belonging. And I think just from having those three topics is really what we're, aside from the treaty piece, those are really what we are talking about. That sense of community, creating a sense of community is really important, not only for you, but for us as well. And because of history, and I'm going to go back there again, because of history, a lot of people won't know that we were also prevented from participating in the economy, that we were also prevented from selling anything that we may have produced to our neighbors. And so having that sense of community was in our own communities, but we weren't welcomed into cities and towns. We needed a pass. There was a pass system in Canada that you needed to have the Indian agent to sign up the pass for you to leave. Now, where else in the world is that familiar? We know from history as well that people came from Africa, South Africa, to have to see what Canada was doing with the reservation system, and seeing that there was policies and oppressive policies placed on Indigenous folk, they went back to South Africa and instituted that apartheid system. When we're looking at passes and markers, those markers were also put on people in Germany to mark that they were Jewish. Where did they learn that from? Canada. When we're talking about experimental things, medical experiments, dental experiments, food experiments, a lot of those things were happening to our kids in residential school. But the pass system is a huge piece of history that a lot of people don't realize. And that was instituted in this country for almost 60 years, if not longer. As soon as they moved us onto reserves, we needed a pass in order to leave those reserves. So can you imagine if you lived in Oakville and you needed a pass in order to pass Highway 5, right? And, you know, during COVID, and we're still in a pandemic, where we're prevented now from like, we're at a stay-at-home order. And I kind of, in a sense, you know, like, history does repeat itself, and history is repeating itself right now. But now everybody's included in staying at home. And it wasn't just Indigenous folk that had to stay at home. It's everybody. And so when I see that, I'm kind of like, oh, that's similar to the pass system, right? And so these are things that are very, these are situations in history that is repeating itself now. When we know about experiments that are happening, there's hesitancy in vaccinations in our communities. Why? Because we were experimented on from medical experiments, right? And, you know, and so when we're talking about history and treaties and even that sense of community, we had a very, very, very strong sense of community in the communities that I'm Cree, so I'm from the prairies. And even our communities, even when I was growing up, there was a place that was called the Fox Farm in Prince Albert, where it was just poor Métis and non-status Indians that went and lived. But it was, and I'm saying Indians because that was what we were called back then. And but man oh man, we would go to our grannies or our cousins, and we would play and laugh and have such a wonderful time. And when we started doing our virtual tea with Doda and having conversations with our grandmas and grandpas, that's what they talked about, the remember whens. Remember when we would gather together. Remember when we would go and have tea. Even though we are Indigenous, we're no different than you guys. We still have the same, our body parts are still the same spot. You know, and so, you know, we're no different, but it's because we've been separated from you for such a long time, the way that Canada has placed Indigenous folk on reserves, not welcoming Indigenous people into communities, and even not even welcoming Indigenous people into Oakville, Burlington, right? When we know that just south of around Highway 5, Dundas area, if people are been in Oakville long enough would know that that was an orchard, that was huge orchards over there, apples, peaches, cherries, whatever was up there, and in Burlington. And an awful lot of the people from Six Nations or the Mississaugas of the Credit would come there and would be the migrant workers and to pick the fruits and vegetables for people in Oakville, Burlington, and even the city of Toronto, but not welcome there. You're fine to come and pick our food, but you're not fine enough to be in our community. And so we have, you know, so those are kinds of some of the things that I know about, you know, trying to create that sense of community, preventing from being part of the community, and then now wanting to be in the community again, right? We've never left. We're still the same people that might have moved in different points of the world, or not the world, but in different points of Canada. But you know, that pass system is huge. That that our parents and our grandparents went through, that if you wanted to go and visit your kids in residential school, you needed a pass. And if you didn't come back in your 2-week time, you could have been arrested and thrown in jail. And that was only for Indigenous people. And we did lots of other things to, Japanese and Chinese. But the Indigenous folk is what we're talking about here tonight. And there is a movie that, a documentary that is called The Pass System. And it was written by a young girl, her name is Alex, from Edmonton. And it was more so, that pass system was more so in the prairies. And because I've only lived in the prairies when I was younger, and living in Ontario now for the last 25 years as an adult. So I know that the pass system was big in the prairies. But, bringing back that sense of community, having the community, being part of the community in Halton, creating a sense of community for people to come and learn with us and stand shoulder to shoulder. And that's what we're trying to create here in Halton. And being part of having that land is going to be huge. And we can hardly wait to tell you and to share with you. And we're looking forward to that day when we're not at a stay-at-home order any longer.
Thanks, Sherry. I just wanted to go back to the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls National Awareness Day that was yesterday. And then acknowledge that there's, just having an agenda as we move forward, because that's something that is, we try our best to do. But if you ever hang out with the grandmas, yeah, the agenda is a nice idea, and we want to do our best to deliver what every single person in here is asking for. But what we do is the work from our heart. And so we have this piece of agenda, we have an idea in our mind. And today, when we really sat down, it was, let's just have a conscious conversation, present conversation with the people that are here. And so the agenda that we did have for today was that we wanted to share with you what we did yesterday. And what was really important to us was that we shared time with some women in Halton. And so this is the history that we know now in Halton, and would love to share. I think Bev from WHAM, you're on here, and I know that I saw your beautiful face. So I spoke with the founder, I want to say that's the founder of WHAM, which is Women of Halton Action Movement. They've been around in Halton since the 1800s, 1981. We found out that Bev started this group. And so I reached out to Bev a few weeks ago and said, hey, everything that we did together in the fall and the last 8 years with them, because they started the Sisters in Spirit Vigils in Halton, and probably did so much more advocacy. And so when I reached out to her and said, hey, we're thinking of doing something on our live, would you be interested in joining us? And she was a bit hesitant because we're pretty aggressive online. We're like, hey, let's just do it. And so, her and Carol ended up joining us. And so to prepare for that event, I went to visit her, and she gave me a file folder. And she said, Jody, it's funny, I just started to look into our history of WHAM, and I noticed that, we actually started our WHAM in 1981 in May, exactly 40 years in May ago, that we have we've started now this living monument, or it's being groomed to be prepared. And so when I went to pick this file folder up, I actually want to scroll to see Bev's face, because I just love her so much for what she's done in our community. And I think Andrea is on here too. There's a few ladies here I'm seeing now from WHAM, but it was very impactful when I picked up this file folder and I started to go through this. And this is some of the history. They started this advocacy group for Indigenous women. And when she showed this to me, I was kind of taken back, because that's the story of my family. that my great grandmother was enfranchised. And when I did my genealogy, I actually have the record that my grandmother had to sign over. She had to sell her land to her brother-in-law when she left Six Nations. And so I have all of this information. And so it really hit home because she died just before that bill was passed, that WHAM created their women's group 4 to advocate for Indigenous women. And then 2 years after they began their group and began to advocate for them, that bill was passed, and then and women actually got their status back. And unfortunately, my grandmother had just died before she could actually get her status. So it was a really big deal. And what's a really big deal about that to me is that these women were in Halton. And when I started to do this advocacy work in Halton, and I met Sherry, and I said to her, Sherry, I'm here to support the work you're doing. You know, it was kind of like we looked at each other and said, well, we no longer have to do this work together or alone. And then we met these women who we didn't know after, 10 years later, that they actually started the group to support the Indigenous women. That's a big deal. And that's a big story to talk about. And it's really a proud time for Halton. And to know that we knew that there was something bigger here, that's how we see this. So I'd like to just acknowledge that we see this time together with you, not only supporting your learning and understanding about Indigenous history, but we also are taking this opportunity to create a really strong community off of those women who have worked really hard to advocate for the women. And so, I Nyewe, Miigwech, love, love, love the foundation that was here long before we got here, but we know that we're meant to make a difference right now, and we're meant to do this in a really big, good way. So we're going to continue to address and acknowledge all of these amazing messages that you all send. We'll do our best to keep everyone, delivering what we need to deliver to you. I invite you to continue to show up on our Facebook, on our YouTube channel. We invite everybody to come and offer whatever gifts you have, because we're creating something that nobody else pretty much in Canada has created. We have not, as Indigenous people, we have not spent a dime on our garden. Our partner did. Our community has come forward, and our grandmothers continue to tell us that the people will continue to come. And they'll come and they want to learn and they want to be a part of this community, because they know Indigenous ways of knowing and being is about love for all. And I think it's been a long time in our society that people have been afraid to talk about love and hope and peace, because it was attached to maybe religion or something that we weren't allowed to talk about. But I think what the pandemic has done has allowed us to go back and start talking about living from our heart space. And so thank you all so much for joining us. I think we're coming to the end of our time together this evening.
Mm-hmm.
It's never an end.
It never ends. I know it comes.
Never an end. It's a hoop.
Yeah, it's a hoop. And I just wanted, I put in the chat, we're having a free paint night on June 9th. And it's on YouTube. So please join us, show your creativity, join us for a free paint night. We had one last night and it was absolutely wonderful. So again, we'll try and stick to as close as we can to the agenda that's set out, but it is a colonized thing, the agenda. So we try and stay in that hoop mindset, but then we also have all this other stuff in the middle that we want to pick at too. So again, thanks so much for coming, everyone. And we look forward to all your comments.
Can I just share one more thing tomorrow? And so for all of you who want to engage with our elders, tomorrow at 12 noon, Deahande, his name is Deahande Miller. His name is Frank Miller, Uncle Frank. He was at our land today and he's so amazing. And so he'll be on there for an hour tomorrow on our stream. You can find it again at Grandmother's Voice Facebook or YouTube, but he will be talking about the Thanksgiving address and really breaking it down. He's a language, I say, expert. He's always been connected, and so he's amazing. So if you'd like to join, and you can always go back and watch any of these. He's just going to be live tomorrow at noon, but definitely an elder you want to watch.
Thank you both so much, and thank you to everyone for attending. And I'm just seeing so many nice comments of, thank you to everyone for being prepared to learn in the manner of which you are looking to teach, which is wonderful, because I know that, yeah, there is so much we can take away from this that it goes beyond just how you're sharing, but then what you're sharing, but how you're sharing it as well. And I think that's tremendous that everyone's really open to that. So we will see everyone next week. Jody, Sherry, thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Everyone else, enjoy the nice weather that's coming around. And hopefully all the mothers and grandmothers have a very lovely Mother's Day this weekend. Bye, all.